Amazon is really showing how important security is with their Reinforce event. And that's our closer look on the Gestalt IT rundown this week with our special guest host, Krista Maycomber. We're also going to be looking at how Veeam is changing their approach to cyber-resiliency, enthusiasm for AI applications in the enterprise, or lack thereof, Microsoft's improvements in security by delaying recall, Oracle, Microsoft, and OpenAI joining hands as a surprise. Some unauthorized access continuing with Snowflake data analytics databases. And of course, the incredible presentations that Google shared at Cloud Field Day last week. Watch the Gestalt IT rundown for more. Welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown, where each time we meet, we run down the IT news of the week with a variable degree of snarkiness. I'm your host, Stephen Foskett, and joining me as my co-host, since Tom is out at HPE Discover this week, is Krista Maycomber of the Futurum Group. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Stephen. I'm excited to be here.
So, as everyone knows, today is National Watch Day and National Garfield the Cat Day. But this week is also, of course, Juneteenth, America's second Independence Day, which is pretty awesome that that's a national holiday now, don't you think?
I do. It's definitely, I think, a great move for the country.
And of course, we're seeing more and more companies celebrating Juneteenth as well. We're celebrating it by recording this episode a day before. And so hopefully no news breaks on June 18th that's worth us covering. Veeam recently hosted customers and analysts at Veeam, announcing a shift in their enterprise strategy. The data protection company is modifying their product strategy to focus more on cyber resiliency and incident response following the acquisition of Coveware. As they're embracing this new enterprise IT world following Broadcom's acquisition of VMware and the announcement of Copilot Plus PCs, I suspect that we're going to see more and more from Veeam heading in different directions. You attended this conference, so what's your take on the new Veeam?
I did, Stephen, and you paint a great picture here. I've been tracking Veeam and attending Veeam for several years now, and I think they still, in some ways, kind of have a perception of being kind of the VM backup company. Of course, that's kind of where Veeam got its start, but certainly they have broadened their approach in terms of not only the workloads they support, but as you mentioned, Stephen, their really kind of their product capabilities and their focus these days, which again, as you mentioned, Stephen, is all around cyber resiliency these days. And they actually made an acquisition soon before the show. It was at the end of April, of a company called Coveware in the incident response side. So really my big takeaways from the show was that it really was kind of a demonstration of how Veeam is putting all of these capabilities in place to be able to, do things like help customers to be more proactive and preventative when it comes to their cyber attacks, to detect attacks sooner. And then again, now that they have this Clover acquisition, also to help sort of on the incident response side. So it's certainly no longer just about, kind of backing up your data and having it to be able to be recovered. And you referenced a couple of other topics, Stephen, as well. One is, of course, the industry as a whole. We're sort of working through the acquisition of VMware by Broadcom. For Veeam, that does have particular significance because Veeam's customer base is still very, quite heavily VMware centric. So Veeam did make sure to kind of showcase it describes its kind of proprietary data format that's, very flexible and really can be kind of allow data to be migrated from one infrastructure to another, whether that be on-prem to cloud, whether it be from one hypervisor to another. So really it was kind of an opportunity for VMware to showcase how it's helping customers or how it will help customers to kind of navigate this transition, and whether it be a workload that they might want to move off of VMware, whether it be they want to, sort of test out how it might work to deploy a particular workload on an alternate hypervisor, for example. Certainly that was something that they took the time to showcase. And then finally, as well, you referenced Microsoft and Copilot Plus. So Veeam has invested with Microsoft to develop sort of its own iteration of Copilot for things like threat detection, diagnostics, and really sort of being, kind of that assistant for, primarily in this case for your backup administrator. So, for example, not only to be able to identify if there is a SharePoint site that has, a high degree of change rate that might indicate malicious activity, but then to be able to kind of immediately trigger an action such as a backup and then kind of the recovery operation, or also to be able to sort of look across the Veeam environment and say, okay, I've identified that these users are not protected. And here's a suggested policy for protection that I would suggest applying based on, the different parameters that are overseen by, the backup administrator. So really, Stephen, again, I would say at the show, we kind of touched on, again, artificial intelligence, cyber resiliency, and also, again, kind of the VMware kind of Broadcom acquisition. So it was, again, really just a great display of how all of those capabilities are coming together. So for our next story, I know that we wanted to kind of touch on a recent study that we came across by LucidWorks, which is kind of covering the fact that the initial excitement around generative AI really is beginning to diminish as companies realize just how hard it is to be able to deploy and take advantage of the technology. So I know you came across the 2024 Gen AI Global Benchmark Study, which showed that organizations are encountering challenges when it comes to moving beyond that pilot stage of adoption, as well as the high cost and the low impact of AI projects. So it sounds a little bit like the bloom is off the rose for AI, but what's your take, Stephen?
Yeah, it's been interesting watching this happen. As you know, we follow the AI space closely at with Futurum Research and also the intelligence platform. And I think that this mirrors a lot of what we're seeing as well. Enterprises are very excited about AI. They really want to implement AI applications, and yet they found it challenging to get real benefit from these solutions. So far, according to this study and according to what we're seeing as well, the most bang for the buck is coming from pretty straightforward uses of enterprise data in sort of a chatbot model. So think of something, for example, where you ingest your corporate FAQs into a chatbot that answers HR questions for employees, or a better search engine for your customer support database, that sort of thing. Those applications seem to be getting, implemented quicker. They seem to be more useful. They seem to derive more value to the customer. But yet, most of those aren't actually delivering financial value to the customers at this point. And I think that that's one of the big challenges here. We've seen companies that have been able to use AI technology, machine learning, machine vision, that sort of thing, that have been able to derive incredible real production and real income from these. We saw those, for example, at the AI Field Day event, where we heard from a greenhouse, Nature Fresh Farms, that's using AI and cameras to assess the freshness of produce. That's a real productive AI application. How were they able to achieve it? They were able to achieve that because the people there were incredibly they had the capability. They were able to create that application, to roll that application out internally. They bit off something that they could chew in terms of a real world application that matched the needs of their business, and they were able to put it into production thanks to the open source nature of a lot of this stuff. On the flip side, if an enterprise is trying to roll out AI and they don't really know what they're doing and they don't really have the in-house capabilities, they're finding this a very steep hill to climb. And I think that that's what we're seeing from this LucidWorks study. And as I said, also from the Futurum Intelligence surveys that are ongoing. Now, we haven't released the latest survey yet, but I think we're seeing the same thing in there, and it'll be exciting to be able to cover that soon. So to sum up, I think that the best way for companies to realize value from AI is to focus on things that are fairly straightforward and easy to implement. For example, when we were at Click Connect a couple of weeks ago, they have a Click Answers product that is able to basically do that first use case, ingest your corporate FAQs or your customer support information, and build a LLM based chatbot that can answer questions based on that information using RAG without inventing and hallucinating answers that it doesn't have access to. An application like that, I think, would be fairly straightforward, fairly quick to implement, and would bring real customer value. But in terms of using AI more strategically in the business, well, that's not as easy as it sounded at first. Microsoft has announced that they're going to postpone the launch of the Windows recall feature. This was originally planned to come on by default with Copilot Plus PCs, but widespread concern made them hold back that feature, at least for now. The feature captured screenshots and categorized the text that it saw at regular intervals in a way to help users find past activities on their PCs and sort of act as an online assistant. But it prompted worries about the potential exposure of sensitive information due to the specific implementation that they gave for this feature. Now, Krista, I know that you've written about this, you've read about this. What is your take on the challenges of recall and the slowing of the implementation?
Certainly, Stephen. And as you mentioned, I did have the opportunity to do a write up on this with Mitch Ashley, who is on the TechStrong side of our Futurum family here. So we'll make sure to include a link to that particular research note here. But absolutely, our initial take is that it is a little bit of a double-edged sword here. So certainly you can imagine the potential benefits in areas like productivity, being able to kind of search for or identify a document much more quickly, or for individuals who are even kind of maybe more visually oriented, kind of maybe using that screenshot capability to be able to, locate kind of tasks or projects. But as you mentioned, when this was announced, there certainly were concerns regarding, the data privacy and the data security. What I will say is that Microsoft made sure to articulate that the data is stored locally, and that it is encrypted as REST. However, naturally we could imagine potentially a hacker gaining access to that PC, of course, which would naturally kind of expose the data. So they did also, I would add as well, from the standpoint of Microsoft, they did provide some guidelines and best practices for using the capability. So for me, when I think about the fact that Microsoft did kind of provide guidelines for how to use the capability, it did make sure to do things like architect the solution so that the data is as within the control of the user as much as possible. And now they're delaying it, right? So I think from my standpoint, I read it as Microsoft, kind of trying to be, as cautious as possible, and really kind of try to make sure that there are no unintended data breaches, and really make sure that, customers are as armed as possible, with kind of the best defenses if they are going to use the feature. And also even possibly from sort of, even just kind of a market perception standpoint, sort of maybe give the market a little bit more time to kind of get its head around the capability to evaluate the security features so that it doesn't then sort of potentially, delay the adoption of those PCs. So again, that's sort of my take on the delay there and sort of, kind of our high level take on the capability. Oracle, Microsoft, and OpenAI have joined forces to integrate Microsoft Azure AI with Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. This trio kind of bolster the capability for OpenAI, which can utilize Oracle Gen 2 AI infrastructure to support end user AI applications. So, Stephen, with Oracle sort of rising as the fourth hyperscaler, if you will, is this an awkward fit or is it a natural fit from your perspective?
Well, it does look a little awkward considering that Microsoft is a big investor in OpenAI And most of the OpenAI workloads today are running on Microsoft's Azure infrastructure. And Microsoft Azure, as you mentioned, I mean, OCI, Oracle's cloud, has actually risen to prominence, especially in the enterprise space, as sort of the other hyperscaler. And in fact, to some people, I'm starting to hear Oracle referred to sort of as the safe, non-political one that just gets the job done infrastructure. And frankly, that's pretty cool to have another hyperscale partner in there. Oracle has done some really great things, improving OCI again and again and again. The company has really invested in it. Their Gen 2 AI infrastructure platform is really, really solid. It's essentially what you would build if you had unlimited money and were trying to roll out sort of a state-of-the-art generative AI cluster at this point. It includes, you've got Blackwell GPUs, you've got Grace Blackwell super chips, you've got RDMA clustering, you've got all that cool stuff in there. So it's pretty neat to see the OpenAI folks and Microsoft Azure folks saying, you know what? Yeah, we can work with them. We can allow people to run workloads on Oracle's cloud as well. And this kind of combines this multi-cloud concept in a positive way for customers. So I have to say that I'm very impressed by this. I'm very glad to see that these companies are working together. And frankly, cooperation like this is what the industry needs instead of just more head-to-head, competition out there. So what does this really mean? Well, essentially what it means is that Oracle and Microsoft will both be platforms that can run OpenAI. At least that's how I'm reading it. And that customers will be able to use these services much more seamlessly across Azure and Oracle Cloud infrastructure, and that this will allow Azure users to use OCI more flexibly, OCI to be an alternative platform, and bring greater value to the market overall. So it looks like a good fit. I'm definitely going to be watching this, and I think that this mirrors what we're seeing overall in the emergence of OCI as, like I said at the top, the safe hypervisor, the safe hyperscaler. Pure Storage confirmed that a third party gained unauthorized access to a Snowflake data analytics workspace containing telemetry information and used for customer support. This exposed data included company names, LDAP usernames, email addresses, and software version numbers, but reportedly didn't include sensitive information like passwords or customer stored data. Pure Storage tells us that they immediately blocked further access, but this is just the latest Snowflake-related security breach. I know you've been tracking a number of these Snowflake breaches. It's interesting that this one involves an enterprise infrastructure provider, but what's your take here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I definitely have a couple of takes. I mean, I think the first, like you mentioned, there's sort of no one is safe, right? Kind of from these data breaches. So I know you're mentioning kind of the fact that they are these Snowflake databases. There's been a number of instances of them, so certainly nobody is safe. But kind of beyond that, I think, the fact that Pure Storage did make sure to kind of inform the market regarding what happened, regarding their understanding of what data was compromised, and the fact that they then took that action to kind of block further access. Certainly, that's important, and I think at least for Pure Storage, should go far in terms of kind of helping to maintain that customer trust even as they're working through this breach. From my perspective as well, what's very interesting here is that we do have, for example, as you mentioned, some LDAP usernames that were compromised, company names, email addresses. I bring this up because what we're seeing is that attackers are increasingly targeting user credentials. They're trying to log in instead of hack in. And so I think from my perspective, that's sort of the big potential cautionary flag here, is that if they do have this information, potentially they can, of course, then take it and, further kind of penetrate other systems and things of that nature. And so I think as we look at some of these breaches moving forward, that would be one thing that I would be keeping an eye out for is, are they going to be continuing to target this type of information? Google Cloud presented at Cloud Field Day 20 last week, and the company provided a comprehensive overview of their enterprise cloud offerings, emphasizing the platform's global reach and robust planet-scale capabilities. The presentation showed Google's comprehensive offerings from security, storage, and networking to Cloud Run, which enables workloads to be easily run in the cloud. We also got deep dives into Vertex, GKE, and more. So, Stephen, what was the takeaway from this presentation?
Well, I'd say the big takeaway from this presentation is that if you're an enterprise wanting to run workloads in the cloud, Google's got you covered. Um, as many people know, Google is sort of taken a different path than the other two major hyperscalers out there. In that Google is building on the open source and sort of the DevOps methodology, and especially on Kubernetes, which really came from Google, as a way to connect with the enterprise customer. Whereas, for example, Microsoft Azure is more trying to bring the enterprise customer in from the data center with a more familiar environment. So Google's presentation throughout was essentially, their message was essentially, we can do this for you. One of the things that I loved about the presentation overall, which was an entire day last week, was that you can run enterprise workloads in the cloud, you can run modern workloads in the cloud, and you can run next generation AI activities in the cloud, all within the Google umbrella and all within a mostly unified platform. So we had, to kick things off, we had a look at some of the overall Google infrastructure to run enterprise apps, including the Titanium technology, which is their infrastructure that essentially allows you to run enterprise applications on virtual machines, for example, running VMware workloads or SAP and things like that, but also having offload capability integrated into that with some of these Google proprietary offload systems. We also saw how we can run modern applications there using GKE. We got an update on GKE Autopilot, which is an incredible technology that allows users to, as the name says, let their applications run and not have to worry so much. We saw next generation storage technology, which, it may not be everybody's cup of tea, but it's really incredible to see how far storage has come in the cloud. I mean, essentially, the Google storage platform is what we all wish that we could have had, 10 years ago, but it just wouldn't have been possible. We also heard about security. But the big next topic was the AI world. Now, of course, AI is an area that everybody's trying to implement. As we talked about earlier in the show, many enterprises are facing serious uphill challenges actually rolling these things out. That's one reason that I wanted to talk about the Google Cloud presentation, because so much of what they talked to us about last week was about making it easier and simpler and more affordable, and just opening the door to running AI infrastructure, AI applications in the cloud. Google, in fact, talked about what they're calling their AI hypercomputer, which is basically a platform designed to run applications, AI workloads in the cloud. They also talked about some of the other things that they've got. For example, Cloud Assist, which allows you to create, to write, to deploy, to build applications using Google's Gemini large language model. We saw using that as Code Assist to help with writing code. We saw it as well with the example being a storage insight as a way to use Gemini to categorize unstructured data that's existing in the cloud. And then finally, we took a look at the Vertex platform, which is a way to in an automated way to build and deploy applications in the cloud across a wide variety of different infrastructure components, but in a way that's very, very simple to build generative AI applications. So overall, it was a really convincing presentation. Again, the message is no matter where you are whether you're just trying to move virtual machines somewhere, or whether you want to build modern applications, or whether you want to embrace AI, Google is there for you. So do check out the Tech Field Day website, check out the Google Cloud presentation from Cloud Field Day 20. I think you'll be impressed by where Google has come and their understanding of enterprise needs. Now let's take a closer look at another event that recently happened. Amazon Web Services recently held their Reinforce conference as the company attempts to partner with customers to deliver a more secure environment. We've spent a lot of time talking about the challenges of security. That was one of the topics from my conversations on the TechStrong Gang yesterday as well, for example. And it's not easy to actually build secure by design. Amazon, I think, has a really reasonable and realistic concept. Last year, they talked about the shared responsibility model, which says what I think we all know, which is that it's not up to the hypervisor company or the hyperscaler company. I keep saying hyperscaler company to deliver security. It's up to everyone, and it's not even an application developer thing. It's all of us. And I think that that's sort of the message that we're hearing this year as well, as Amazon talks about emphasizing security throughout the entire IT structure. We also saw product announcements as well from AWS, including some enhancements to Nitro that help to secure the underlying infrastructure, which is an area that I know that we're all concerned about when it comes to running applications in the cloud. Krista, you were there. You saw these announcements. Talk to us a little bit more about your takeaways from AWS Reinforce.
Yeah. So, Stephen, you definitely alluded to it in kind of the introductory comments here. So, it was the second year that I had the opportunity to attend Reinforce, and there was the consistent theme, right? Sort of around, okay, having secure cloud infrastructure, empowering customers with the right tools and services to be able to, kind of carry forth their portion of the security charge, if you will. And I would say that carried through into, there was a lot of discussion around, how do we really kind of bake security into the technology itself, and kind of across that perspective to really kind of make sure that security is as intrinsic as possible. We had a really interesting opportunity to hear from Paul Vixie at an analyst dinner on the Monday night there. He is a VP of Security and Deputy CISO with AWS, but he's better known for being a pioneer around DNS. And we had a great conversation with him around his charge of sort of restoring security to pre-internet levels, as he calls it, which is a lot around kind of baking security in at the technology layer, but then also empowering us as human beings, right, to be smarter. And to kind of, as you referenced in the opening remarks, Stephen, really nurture this culture of security within our organizations. And all of those topics certainly resonated through as well when we look at the keynote conversation, which was from Chris Betts, who is the CISO of AWS. And again, he really kind of talked about not only, as you referenced, how is AWS leaning on capabilities like Nitro to be able to make sure that, the malicious actors don't have kind of that logical access to the underlying infrastructure, or using tools like Amazon Bedrock. This was part of the keynote discussion there to really allow customers to have control over what data they're using when it comes to the foundational models that they're creating for their generative AI applications. But also, again, he really kind of talked about how do we all individually become good stewards of security, and really kind of make sure that that's something that's really ingrained at the cultural level of the organization.
Yeah, I think that's a real good point, Krista. And I want to jump in on that because, like I said, that's one of the things that we talked about on TechStrong Gang yesterday. Specifically, the point that I made there is that, it's not right for people to basically lay all the blame for security issues on the foot of hyperscalers or application developers or anyone. I mean, all of us are responsible to take proactive security measures. But yet, I honestly feel like so much of us in society are going in the other direction. I see people getting frustrated, throwing up their hands, saying security is just out of hand. And I understand it because there's breach after breach after breach, and it seems like nothing is safe. And when nothing is safe, I think people kind of take the attitude, well, whatever, I might as well use an easy password. I might as well not bother about basic enterprise security controls because it's all going to get taken anyway. And I guess maybe I don't know, maybe that free subscription to credit monitoring is really going to protect me here. But the truth is, it's really not. And all of us have to take much more of a joint approach to security. Now, this doesn't let hyperscalers off the hook. They absolutely have to secure their infrastructure. They absolutely have to figure out ways of developing and delivering infrastructure that is secure by design. They have to figure out ways, more importantly, of developing security technologies that are easy and friendly and attractive to implement for application developers. And then those application developers, I think, have to think about the user interface of security. They have to think about the user experience, and they have to think about ways of kind of holding out a hand to the users and saying, we've built this great platform. Now we need to work together. And ultimately, though, I worry too that there's always going to be security breaches, and we have to figure out how to phrase those things in a way that doesn't cause people to just give up hope on security entirely. So, talk to us, I think, a little bit about the ways that Amazon is trying to work to bring security to make advanced security more accessible to customers and ultimately to benefit us all.
Sure, sure. So beyond kind of the couple things that I had mentioned, they did talk about using generative AI in AWS CloudTrail Lake to basically have a natural language kind of query capability to be able to analyze security events, to be able to kind of not only uncover them, but also to resolve them more quickly, right? So that's a little bit more leaning towards kind of the security operations side, I would say. But again, it's really kind of just making it a little bit easier to be able to, again, kind of uncover and maybe triage, when we have particular events. But also, you, Stephen, you were talking about kind of application development and how do we really kind of, bake in security best practices. Um, they also talked about the fact that they now have a pre-built framework in AWS Audit Manager. And that was really to kind of match when we look at Amazon SageMaker, their Gen AI implementation of that to make sure that it matches the AWS recommended best practices. So almost kind of putting, kind of the guardrails, if you will, around that implementation and kind of making it easier to identify if there, is something that kind of falls outline of those best practices. So those were just kind of a couple of examples from that perspective. And the other thing that I would add, and this is a little bit more from the perspective of the security of AWS, their infrastructure itself, but they've been showcasing for really over the last 12 to 18 months that I've seen AWS MadPot, which is essentially kind of their threat sensor, honeypot capability that not only that helps them to potentially attract the attacker to kind of, target these decoys that they're deploying through MadPot versus kind of, the legitimate infrastructure. But they're using that to be able to understand the tactics and techniques of attackers as well, and to kind of build that insight and credibility. This year at Reinforce, they talked about something called Sonaris, which is a tool that they use internally to kind of analyze network traffic and stop potentially malicious attempts and kind of uncover vulnerabilities as well. So those are just a few of the things, that we saw that kind of came to mind there.
I think it's interesting as well that Amazon has this separate conference focused on security. To me, that says that the company really does take the topic seriously and is trying to make a difference and really make sure that the security community feels welcome. I think that's important because, if you go to reInvent, which is their big conference, well, everyone's going to get lost at reInvent. I mean, the conference is so huge. There's something for everyone, which is great, but it's very hard to, it doesn't feel focused. It feels like basically AWS everything. It's the entire IT industry, everything from, servers and storage and, kind of nerdy hardware kind of things, all the way up to application development and, of course, artificial intelligence. And in that community, it's easy to overlook security. But when you get reinforced, well, nobody's going to overlook security because that's really the topic here. I guess overall, what's your take on Amazon's approach to security, and what's the go away message that they would leave people with coming to Reinforce?
Yeah. So, so from their perspective, right, I would say the go away message is, they talk about not all clouds are created equal, right? And I think certainly they have made the care to show that they've been investing for years, right, at this point, and really kind of making sure that their infrastructure is secure by design. Um, and also, again, really that security, it has to be kind of baked in not only at that technology layer, but also when it comes to our people, our processes, and things of that nature. And it really kind of has to be reinforced, and that is really critical to success moving forward when we think about as a society, how do we, for example, really embrace AI and generative AI to rethink and become more efficient in how we do our jobs and sort of how we go about our daily life. I would say those are really kind of the couple of takeaways, the major ones that I would say Amazon would likely want everyone to walk away with. And I would agree, Stephen. It's, I think a testament that they have this dedicated conference where we can have, 2, 3 days of really kind of focused, dedicated conversation in terms of not only what AWS is doing, not only how it's trying to empower its customers, but also one thing I didn't touch on yet is the fact that the whole first day for the analysts was all around their partner strategy. And how is AWS working with its partners, and really kind of trying to empower partners through the marketplace as well, to make sure that those, kind of complementary capabilities across the security stack are accessible as well.
Well, thanks so much, Krista. It's been great having your perspective on these things. It's great being able to lean on your perspective internally as well. And I appreciate you joining us for little extras on the rundown over the last few weeks, too. Look forward to more of that in the future. Um,
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks for everybody for listening. Before we go, I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that are coming up in the weeks ahead. So first off, I want to call out the 6.5 Summit. So recordings from the 6.5 Summit are now available. That was last week. It was a mega event. This thing is huge. It covered topics everywhere from cloud infrastructure and cybersecurity and enterprise platforms, all the way up to bigger topics like automotive and semiconductors and sustainability and the future of work. If you go to 6.5 Summit website, which we'll link in the show notes, you'll be able to watch any of those videos. Just incredible content there. I also want to call out that all of the videos from last week's Cloud Field Day event are now online, along with the videos from our appearances, Tech Field Day appearances at Cisco Live, at Click Connect, and App Dev Field Day as well. So do check those out. And looking forward here now, we're going to be live. Actually, we were live yesterday from HPE Aruba's presentations at HPE Discover. So just go to the Tech Field Day LinkedIn. You'll be able to see those, and those will appear soon on our YouTube channel. We're also going to be back July 10th and 11th with Networking Field Day. We've got an incredible setup of delegates coming to hear from companies like Arcus, cPacket, Hedgehog, Intel, and Selector AI for Networking Field Day. Also, I'm excited to say that I'm going to the Share conference in Kansas City to learn more about mainframe technology in August. So keep an eye out for that. And we've just announced more Tech Field Day events. So we're going to be returning later in 2024 with AI and AI data infrastructure events. We've also got another Edge Field Day event, a Security Field Day event, Cloud Field Day, and I bet that we're going to do another Networking Field Day event too. So thank you very much for joining us for those. Keep an eye on your social media, subscribe, and you can learn more about them. Thanks for watching the Gestalt IT Rundown. You can catch new episodes every Wednesday as a YouTube video or on your favorite podcast application. And going forward, we're also going to be streaming the rundown every week on TechStrong TV, which is going to a 5-day schedule. So check out TechStrong TV for more on that. We'll be back next Wednesday to talk about more of the IT news in the week that was. But until then, for Tom Hollingsworth, who couldn't join us today, but will be back soon, for myself, for Krista, and for all of us here at the Futurum Group and Gestalt IT, here's wishing you a great, great day.